Recently, they wanted to ban cryptocurrencies, but today they are in a hurry to legalize them. Why? In this video, I'm going to prove that this is not because of the desire for innovation. Everything is much more self-serving. This is Joe Brown. In 2016, he worked as a stockbroker and dealt with 1% of the richest investors. Around the same year, he and his colleagues, the same financial advisors, advised clients to get rid of cryptocurrencies. Stay away from Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, and other coins. They argued that it was a pyramid scheme and only fools would mess with it. But today the situation is changing rapidly. We even see that longtime opponents of cryptocurrencies, such as Jamie Dimon, CEO JP Morgan, say that you will be able to buy Bitcoin directly through their bank. And this bank will even kindly agree to keep it for you. And it's not just JP Morgan, it's other banks, for example, Morgan Stanley. Many, including me, thought it was just an example of the old saying, if you can't beat them, join them. And perhaps there is some truth in this. The government just realized that it is impossible to kill cryptocurrency. So now they say, let's adopt it to be able to regulate and control this new market. But recently, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said out loud what is usually considered to be silent. He spoke about the real reason why they are so hastily accepting cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and especially stablecoins. Let's hear it. We believe that the United States should be the main engine for digital assets. What are the members of this committee and the Senate trying to achieve? To build a good market infrastructure for this, so that the whole world then uses our best practices. There are suggestions that over the next few years, digital assets can create demand for up to $2 trillion in US Treasury bonds. This announcement comes at a critical time when demand for US Treasury bonds is plummeting and auctions are failing, as a foreign buyer is leaving. The yield of US Treasury bonds has been worrying investors lately as interest rates continue to rise higher and higher, which means that the cost of servicing debts is growing, the cost of new debts is also growing. The rapid decline in the number of large buyers of US Treasury bonds is the reason that the United States is in a hurry to build the infrastructure for the adoption, regulation, and control of cryptocurrencies. And here's why. You see now the largest holders of US Treasury bonds. At the end of the list, you will see the name Tether. Already, experts predict that by the end of 2028, the capitalization of stablecoins will exceed the amount of capital held by all the largest countries in the world in the form of US Treasury bonds. It's only in 2.5 years. This is exactly what US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent means when he says that the stablecoins will create demand for US Treasury bonds worth $2 trillion. This is about twice as much as the largest foreign buyer of US Treasury securities holds today, Japan. In other words, the stablecoins will become the new holders of US debt. And it will be financed by those who buy these stablecoins. In fact, it is like a tool for pumping money, quietly, without noise, through cryptocurrency in a dollar wrapper. And this, of course, will weave cryptocurrency and the crypto market even deeper into the US financial system. But in cryptocurrencies, until recently, there was no control at all. That is why we have seen a lot of crashes, pyramids, scams. People thought that their money still belonged to them, but in fact it was no longer there. That is why a new bill is currently being considered in the United States, Genius Act, specifically for regulating stablecoins. If, or more correctly, when it is adopted, companies like Tether USEC will be required to hold real reserves in the form of US Treasury bills and bonds. In other words, just promising that they are doing this will no longer work, it will be necessary to keep them. After that, cryptocurrency dollars will finally fall under the law and will be regulated and controlled, in the same way as ordinary banks and funds. But don't think that they are doing this to protect you, that they are passing these laws to protect your investments and money. If it was a question of protecting investors, they would have done it a long time ago, probably under Gary Gensler. Those who have been stewing in cryptocurrency for a long time have already seen both rises and collapses. They know how easy it is to lose money here. They went through the collapse of Fort 10, Terra Luna, and so on. They have seen absolutely everything, from fraud to empty promises. And the government also saw it and did nothing about it. Well, except someone was fined there. But I'm talking about the fact that they have done nothing to protect investors. But now that the US debt market is under threat, they are suddenly very concerned about it. So don't think it's all about your protection. No, it's just about saving the treasury bond market. Because no matter how much the crypt develops, no matter how many people go into decentralized money, the US authorities want one thing. So that all this is still based on the dollar and on US treasury bonds. So that alternative money is not an alternative to the dollar, but just a new wrapper for the same American assets. If this happens, we can say that the mission of the cryptocurrency has failed, and we have lost. When a country's public debt approaches 120% of GDP, the state faces a sovereign debt crisis. At such a moment, the only thing that is really important for the state, that matters, is to prevent default. Theoretically, default is always a choice. You can just say we won't pay, but you can also print money to pay off. And that sounds like a way out, right? But here's the problem: you print money, you get inflation, and inflation raises interest rates. And with them it becomes more and more expensive to service debt and print new debt. In other words, it turns out to be a vicious circle. To pay off an old debt, you print new money, but this very action makes the debt even more expensive. This is a debt spiral that leads to disaster. And now the politicians in the US Congress, in the Federal Reserve System, in the Ministry of Finance are trapped. They are forced to pay more and more in order not to simply destroy this system. Look at these graphs. It's crazy how much is spent on maintaining this system. But they have several ways to handle the situation. For example, to deregulate banks and allow him to increase his share in treasury bonds. This is one piece of a big puzzle. Another historical way is to revolve gold. Therefore, the US Treasury Secretary denies that there will be no revolutionization of gold. Also, the governor of Florida, in May of this year, signed a law that officially recognizes gold and silver as legal tender in the state. Perhaps we will see something similar in other states. And finally, the third way to avoid default is to solve the debt crisis and create demand for US government debt. This is cryptocurrency. The Genius Et Bill, which will oblige stablecoins such as Tether and the USEC to hold their reserves in US treasury bonds. And here's the paradox. Many people come to cryptocurrency thinking that they are leaving the traditional financial system, that they are leaving the dollar, from the control of government banks, from endless inflation and money printing. And so it was before, but things are changing. Now, without knowing it, they are putting the same dollar basis under the crypto market. US treasury bonds are becoming the foundation of the cryptocurrency infrastructure. The entire crypto market will provide the US government debt, and the state uses it very skillfully. I must admit, I am even somewhat shocked by how cleverly they do it. That's why I always say, invest only in Bitcoin, because it doesn't matter what the US government does with the Tether, USEC, Ripple, Ethereum. They can accept, regulate, close, put treasury bonds under them, it doesn't matter. Bitcoin is a different story, it's a different animal, unique in its kind. Not yet. Who knows what the states and authorities will come up with in the future, but I do not exclude that they will try to do everything to level the role of Bitcoin as a parallel financial system. So keep your nose to the wind and adapt to the changes. And you will learn about these changes on this channel. So like, subscribe, and see you in the new videos. See you soon.